Amelia Sullivan stood in line at First National Bank, her worn purse clutched against her chest. At 72 years old, her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the arthritis that had settled into her bones after decades of cleaning other people's homes. Her natural silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite the holes in her shoes hidden beneath her ankle-length skirt, she held her head high. She had saved for 6 months. 6 long months of taking extra cleaning jobs, skipping meals, and walking 3 miles instead of taking the bus. All to deposit enough money to finally pay the overdue property taxes on the small house her late husband had left her. The only thing she had left of their 47 years together. The bank was busy that Tuesday morning, filled with people in expensive suits conducting business that Amelia couldn't begin to understand. She felt out of place, but she had every right to be there. Her money was honest money earned through sweat and determination. When her number was finally called, Amelia approached the counter with her envelope of carefully counted bills. She had no idea that the man in the tailored charcoal suit standing 3 people behind her had been watching her since she entered, and she certainly didn't know that what was about to happen would change everything. Like this video if you believe respect has no age limit. Subscribe to see how this unfolds. Amelia placed her envelope on the counter in front of the young teller whose name tag read Connor Mitchell, account manager. He was perhaps 30 with slicked back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning," Amelia said warmly, her voice carrying the gentle southern accent she'd never lost despite 40 years in Chicago. "I'd like to make a deposit, please, into my account." Connor picked up the envelope with 2 fingers, as if it might be contaminated, and peered inside. His expression immediately soured. "Cash," he said the word like it was distasteful. "Do you have any idea how much paperwork cash deposits require?" Amelia felt her cheeks warm. "I am sorry, I didn't know, but I counted it 3 times. It's all there." "I'm sure you did," Connor interrupted, speaking slowly and loudly, as if she were hard of hearing. "But we have protocols for unusual deposits." "Unusual?" Amelia's voice became smaller. She could feel the eyes of other customers turning toward them. Connor sighed dramatically and began counting the bills, spreading them across the counter. Ones, fives, tens, the result of Amelia's careful budgeting and sacrifice. He handled each bill as if it were beneath him. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said, reading from her account information on his screen. "I see here you're, let's see, a domestic worker." The way he said it made Amelia's occupation sound like something shameful. She straightened her shoulders. "I'm a housekeeper." "Yes, I've been cleaning homes for 50 years. Connor's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "And where exactly did you get this much cash?" "Our bank has policies about suspicious deposits, money laundering, fraud." "Excuse me?" Amelia's voice shook now, but with indignation rather than fear. "I earned every single dollar of that money. I'm here to pay my property taxes." Connor leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. "Mrs. Sullivan, please don't raise your voice. I'm simply doing my job. Someone in your position, suddenly bringing in this amount of cash, it raises questions." "Someone in my position?" Amelia repeated, her heart pounding. She felt tears threatening, hot and humiliating. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "I think you know what I mean," Connor said, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a confidential tone, but which carried to the people in line behind her. "Let's be realistic. You show up here with wrinkled bills, no appointment, no proper documentation." "I have my bank card," Amelia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've had an account here for 30 years with a balance that rarely exceeds $200. Connor counted, clicking through his computer, "and now suddenly you have," he counted quickly, his lips moving, $3,200 in cash. "You can understand why that's suspicious." Amelia felt the floor tilting beneath her. Around her, people whispered. A woman in pearls took a deliberate step away from the line. A man in a business suit shook his head with visible disdain. "I can't process this deposit," Connor announced, pushing the money back toward her. "Not without investigating the source of these funds." If you're enjoying this story and want to see what happens next, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to us, as we continue bringing these stories to life. Given your age and your background, it's possible someone is taking advantage of you. Or perhaps you're involved in something you don't fully understand. I understand just fine, Amelia said, but her voice cracked. I understand that you're treating me like a criminal, because please don't make a scene. Connor cut her off. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You can return when you have proper documentation for these funds. Receipts, pay stubs, something that proves this money is legitimate. Amelia's hands shook as she reached for the money. 50 years of hard work, of integrity, of doing the right thing. And this is what it came to. Being humiliated in front of a room full of strangers, treated like a thief or a fool. She turned to leave, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, her carefully saved money clutched in her trembling hands. That's when the voice cut through the murmur of the bank like a blade through silk, cold, controlled, and absolutely lethal. Did I just hear you correctly? Comment below. What would you do in this situation? Don't miss what happens next. The voice belonged to the man in the charcoal suit. As he stepped forward, Amelia noticed details she'd been too distracted to see before. He was in his mid-30s, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes so intensely blue they seemed to see right through people. His suit probably cost more than Amelia made in 6 months, and he moved with a kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Brian Castellano hadn't planned to intervene. He'd come to the bank to meet with the branch manager about certain financial arrangements that required discretion, but the moment he'd seen the elderly woman being dismissed by the arrogant teller, something in him had shifted. Perhaps it was because she reminded him of his own grandmother, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep him fed after his parents died. Or perhaps it was simply that Brian Castano had built his empire on certain principles, and respect for those who worked hard was paramount among them. Connor looked up at Brian, and his face immediately went white. Mr. Castellano, I didn't see you there. You were just what? Brian's voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath the silk. He positioned himself between Amelia and the teller, humiliating a 70-year-old woman for having the audacity to deposit her own money in your bank. Sir, it's bank policy. Connor stammered. Bank policy? Brian leaned forward slightly, and Connor actually flinched. Tell me, does your bank policy involve publicly accusing elderly customers of criminal activity? Does it involve treating hardworking people like criminals because they don't meet your standards of appearance? Amelia stood frozen, unsure what was happening. The man defending her radiated a kind of power she'd never encountered, the kind that made the entire bank go silent. Even the other customers were watching now, but with fear rather than judgment. Mr. Castellano, please understand, Connor tried again. Oh, I understand perfectly. Brian cut him off. I understand that this woman has been a loyal customer of this bank for 3 decades. I understand that she came here to conduct honest business with honestly earned money, and I understand that you treated her with contempt because you decided she wasn't worth your respect. Brian turned to Amelia, and his expression softened in a way that made him look almost human. Mom, are you all right? Amelia nodded, unable to find words. Up close, she could see the tattoo that peeked out from beneath his collar, some kind of symbol she didn't recognize. There was something dangerous about him, something that made every instinct tell her to be afraid. But his eyes, when they looked at her, held nothing but concern and, surprisingly, anger on her behalf. What's your name? Brian asked gently. Amelia Sullivan, she managed to say, and I just wanted to deposit my money. I earned it all legally. I swear. I have pay stubs at home, receipts. I believe you, Brian said simply. Then he turned back to Connor, and his face hardened again. Process Mrs. Sullivan's deposit now. Mr. Castellano, I really don't think I'm not asking you to think, Brian interrupted. I'm telling you to do your job, process the deposit, apologize to Mrs. Sullivan, and then we're going to have a conversation with your supervisor about proper customer service. Connor's hands shook as he reached for the money Amelia had been clutching. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Brian stayed at the counter while Connor processed the deposit, his presence ensuring there were no further issues with the transaction. Amelia stood beside him, still trying to understand what had just happened. Thank you, she whispered. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Brian replied, his eyes never leaving Connor, who was fumbling through the deposit process. No one should be treated that way, especially not someone who's clearly worked hard their entire life. You don't even know me, Amelia said. Brian finally looked at her, and his expression was unreadable. I know enough. After the deposit was completed, with a stammered apology from Connor that satisfied no one, Brian turned to Amelia. May I walk you out, Mrs. Sullivan? Amelia hesitated. Every rational part of her brain said this man was dangerous. The way the bank employees looked at him, the way even the security guard stepped aside when he walked past. This was not an ordinary businessman, but he'd stood up for her when no one else would. Yes, she said quietly. Thank you. As they walked toward the exit, the branch manager rushed out of his office, face pale with panic. Mr. Castellano, I had no idea you were here. If you just called ahead, we'll talk, Brian said coldly, about training your staff to treat every customer with dignity, especially the ones who've been loyal to this institution for decades. Outside, the morning sun was bright, and Amelia had to squint against it. Her property tax money was safely deposited. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt shaken, confused, and oddly protected by this stranger who'd intervened. Can I give you a ride home? Brian asked. Amelia looked at the black SUV waiting at the curb, its windows tinted dark. A man in a suit stood beside it, clearly security. Everything about this screamed danger. I live quite far, she said hesitantly. In Englewood. I don't mind, Brian said. Something in his eyes made her believe him. Against every bit of common sense, Amelia found herself nodding. All right then. Thank you, Mr. Castellano. Brian, he corrected gently. Please call me Brian. As they drove through Chicago streets, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn into something she couldn't possibly understand, and she had no idea that Brian Castellano was thinking the exact same thing.
Subscribe now.
You won't believe what happens when she discovers who he really is. The SUV was more luxurious than any car Amelia had ever been in. Leather seats, tinted windows, and a kind of quiet that spoke of money and power. Brian sat beside her in the back seat, his security detail driving silently. You didn't have to do this, Amelia said again, fidgeting with her purse. I could have taken the bus. 3 miles in this heat. Brian glanced at her. I don't think so. Amelia was quiet for a moment, then her natural curiosity got the better of her. Mr. Brian, if you don't mind me asking, why did that teller look so afraid of you? Brian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I have business interests that make me influential in certain circles. What kind of business? Import, export, Brian said smoothly. Real estate, various investments. It wasn't a lie exactly. He did own restaurants, construction companies, and commercial properties throughout Chicago. He just happened to also control most of the organized crime operations in the Midwest. But something about Amelia Sullivan made him want to be, if not honest, at least not entirely dishonest. You must be very successful, Amelia observed. I've been fortunate. No, Amelia said with surprising firmness. Successful? There's a difference. Fortune is what happens to you. Success is what you make happen. Brian found himself smiling despite himself. That's a very wise distinction. I've had 72 years to figure it out, Amelia said, then hesitantly. Can I ask you something else? Of course. Why did you help me really?
You don't know me.
I'm nobody important. Brian turned to look at her fully, and Amelia was struck by the intensity in his blue eyes. You're wrong about that. You're not nobody. You're a woman who worked hard enough to save $3,000 on a housekeeper's salary. That takes discipline and character that most people I know don't possess. Amelia felt tears threatening again, but this time they were different. That's kind of you to say. It's the truth, Brian replied. My grandmother raised me. She worked 3 jobs, cleaned houses, took in laundry, whatever she had to do to keep food on our table. When I saw that teller treating you that way, his hands clenched into fists, it reminded me of every time someone looked down on her because she worked with her hands. What happened to her? Amelia asked softly. She died when I was 19, Brian said, his voice flat. Heart attack while scrubbing someone's kitchen floor. She was 64. I'm so sorry.
So am I, Brian said.
Every day. They sat in silence for a moment, the Chicago streets passing by outside. Then Brian asked, What about you? What do you need $3,000 for, if you don't mind me asking? Property taxes, Amelia explained. On my house. My husband left it to me when he died 7 years ago. It's all I have left of him. If I didn't pay the taxes by next week, the city would auction it. So I've been saving, taking extra jobs, whatever I could do. You shouldn't have to work that hard at your age, and Brian said, and there was genuine anger in his voice. Amelia laughed, though without much humor. She doesn't pay bills, Brian. I do what I have to do. Like my grandmother, Brian murmured. The SUV pulled up in front of a small house in Englewood. It was modest but well-maintained, with flowers in window boxes and a freshly swept front porch. This house represented everything Amelia had worked for. Stability, independence, a place that was hers. This is me, Amelia said. She reached for the door handle, then paused. Brian, I don't know how to thank you. What you did for me today, no thanks necessary, Brian interrupted gently. But Mrs. Sullivan, Amelia, may I ask you something? Of course. Would you allow me to help you? I have connections. I could arrange better pay for your work, safer neighborhoods. No, Amelia said firmly, surprising even herself. I appreciate the offer truly, but I've made it this far on my own terms. I won't start taking charity now. Not even from someone as kind as you've been. Brian studied her for a moment, then nodded with what looked like respect. I understand, but will you at least take my number in case you ever need anything? Not charity, just someone who owes you a debt. You don't owe me anything, Amelia protested. You reminded me why I do what I do, Brian said cryptically. That's worth more than you know. Amelia took the card he offered. It was simple, elegant, with just a name and phone number. No company, no title. As she climbed out of the SUV, Brian called after her. Amelia, that bank teller will be looking for a new job by this afternoon, and the branch manager will be making a substantial donation to a charity for elderly care workers. Amelia turned back, eyes wide. You can do that? Brian's smile was cold. I can do a lot of things, Amelia. Some of them are even legal. The joke fell flat as Amelia suddenly understood. This man who defended her, who treated her with such respect, who reminded her of the good people she'd known in her life. He was also dangerous. Very dangerous. Who are you really, Brian? She asked quietly. Someone who believes in respect, Brian answered. And someone who doesn't forget kindness or cruelty. As the SUV drove away, Amelia stood on her porch, Brian's card clutched in her hand. She should throw it away. She should forget this ever happened. But something told her that Brian Castellano had just become part of her life in ways she couldn't yet understand. Inside the SUV, Brian stared out the window, his mind racing. He'd built his empire on fear, respect, and power. He'd eliminated enemies, brokered deals that would make most people's blood run cold, and made decisions that determined whether people lived or died. But helping Amelia Sullivan had made him feel something he hadn't felt in years.
Human.
His phone buzzed. It was Marco, his second in command. Boss, the Jacob situation is escalating. Need you back. Brian typed back, handle it. I'll be there in an hour. He had an empire to run, enemies to deal with, and a reputation to maintain. But as the SUV merged into traffic, Brian couldn't stop thinking about a 72-year-old woman who'd worked 50 years to save $3,000 and still held her head high. Like, if you want to see what happens next, this story is just getting started. Amelia didn't call Brian. 3 weeks passed, and his card stayed in her purse, a reminder of a surreal morning that felt more like a dream with each passing day. She returned to her routine, cleaning houses, taking the bus, counting her pennies. The only difference was that when she passed the First National Bank, she crossed the street to avoid it. She'd opened an account at a smaller community bank where the tellers treated her like a human being. But life had other plans. On a Thursday afternoon, Amelia was cleaning the Whitmore residence, a massive house in Lincoln Park that paid her enough to cover groceries for a month. Mrs. Greenwood was hosting some kind of charity event, and Amelia had been hired to help with preparations. She was in the kitchen arranging hors on silver platters when she heard the doorbell. Mrs. Greenwood's excited voice carried from the foyer. "Mr. Castellano, how wonderful that you could make it. Your donation to the Children's Hospital Foundation is incredibly generous." Amelia's hands froze. It couldn't be the same Castellano. It was a common Italian name, surely. Amelia. She turned slowly, a tray of canapes in her hands, to find Brian Castellano standing in the kitchen doorway. He was in a black suit today, looking every inch the powerful businessman. But his expression, surprised, almost delighted, was entirely genuine. "Brian," she breathed, "what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," he said, stepping into the kitchen. Behind him, Mrs. Greenwood was hovering, clearly confused by this interaction. "I work here," Amelia said simply. "I'm helping with the event. You know each other?" Mrs. Greenwood asked, her voice bright with curiosity and something else. Calculation, perhaps. She was a woman who collected connections the way some people collected art. "We've met," Brian said smoothly, not taking his eyes off Amelia. "Mrs. Sullivan helped me with a matter recently. I've been hoping to repay the favor." That was a generous interpretation of their encounter, Amelia thought. Before she could respond, Mrs. Whitmore clapped her hands together. "How wonderful! Amelia, dear, why don't you take a break? I'm sure Mr. Castellano would appreciate your company while I attend to the other guests." It wasn't really a suggestion. Mrs. Greenwood practically pushed them toward the back patio, clearly thrilled to have facilitated some mysterious connection between her housekeeper and one of Chicago's most influential and generous philanthropists. Alone on the patio, with the sound of the party, a distant murmur, Amelia finally spoke. "You don't have to do this. I'm working." "I'm not doing anything," Brian said, "except talking to someone I'm genuinely happy to see." He paused. "You didn't call?" "No," Amelia admitted. "I didn't think it would be appropriate." "Why not?" Amelia studied him. In the afternoon light, she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow. The way his eyes held shadows that spoke of things he'd seen, things he'd done. "Because I'm not stupid, Brian. I know what you are. And what am I?" His voice was carefully neutral. "Dangerous," Amelia said quietly. "Important. Someone who lives in a world I don't understand and don't want to be part of." "You're not wrong," Brian acknowledged. "But does that change the fact that I respect you, that I appreciate what you represent?" "What do I represent to you?" Amelia asked, genuinely curious. Brian was quiet for a moment, leaning against the patio railing. "Dignity," he finally said. "Honesty. The kind of strength that comes from choosing to work hard and live right even when it would be easier not to." "You could have all those things too," Amelia observed, "if you chose different work." "It's too late for me," Brian said. And there was something in his voice, regret perhaps, or resignation. "I made my choices a long time ago, but that doesn't mean I can't recognize real worth when I see it." Before Amelia could respond, a commotion erupted from inside the house. Shouting. The sound of breaking glass, a woman screaming. Brian's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The philosophical man beside her vanished, replaced by someone cold and lethal. He pulled out his phone, pressed a button. "Marco, situation at the Greenwood residence.
"Get here now."
Then he turned to Amelia, his expression intense. "Stay here. Don't go inside." "What's happening?" "Stay here," Brian repeated more forcefully. Then he was moving swift and purposeful into the house. Amelia's heart pounded. Every instinct told her to run, to hide, to protect herself, but Mrs. Greenwood was in there and other people, and despite everything, Amelia couldn't just abandon them. She followed Brian inside. The scene in the great room was chaos. For men in masks had burst in through the front door. They had guns. Amelia had never seen real guns before outside of television. Mrs. Greenwood was pressed against the wall, her guests cowering. The men were demanding jewelry, money, anything valuable, and Brian stood in the center of it all, utterly calm. You have 5 seconds to leave, he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. One of the masked men laughed nervously. Who the hell are you? I'm the reason you're about to have the worst day of your lives, Brian replied. 4 seconds. He's bluffing, another gunman said. He's not even armed. The front door burst open. 6 men in dark suits poured in. Brian's security team. They moved with military precision. Weapons drawn, but not yet fired. The would-be robbers found themselves surrounded in seconds. Put down your weapons. Brian commanded face down on the floor. Now the authority in his voice left no room for argument. The gunmen complied, their bravado evaporating. Amelia watched from the kitchen doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth. This was Brian Castellano's world. Violence barely contained. Power exercised without hesitation. Life and death decisions made in seconds. After the police arrived and the gunmen were taken away, Mrs. Greenwood threw herself at Brian, sobbing with relief. You saved us. You saved all of us. How can I ever repay you? No repayment necessary, Brian said, gently extracting himself from her grip. His eyes found Amelia across the room. I'm just glad everyone's safe. But Amelia saw the truth in his eyes. He'd been terrified, not for himself, but for her. He'd seen her follow him inside despite his orders, and for just a moment, his carefully controlled facade had cracked. Later, after the police finished their questions and the guests had been sent home, Brian found Amelia in the kitchen. She was cleaning up broken glass, her hands shaking slightly. You didn't listen, he said quietly. No, Amelia agreed. I don't follow orders well. It's a personality flaw. Brian almost smiled. Then his expression turned serious. Amelia, those men. They weren't random robbers. This was a targeted hit. Against you? Against anyone associated with me? Brian confirmed. My enemies knew I'd be here. They wanted to send a message. Amelia set down the dustpan and turned to face him. And you're telling me this because you need to understand what being connected to me means, Brian said intensely. It means danger. It means risk. It means your life could be in jeopardy just because someone saw you talking to me. Then why did you approach me at the bank? Amelia asked. Because I couldn't help myself, Brian admitted. Because seeing you being treated that way made me angry in a way I haven't felt in years. Because he stopped himself, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, Amelia. I don't know what I'm doing. Amelia studied this powerful, dangerous man who suddenly looked almost vulnerable. You're trying to be good, she said softly. In a world that doesn't let you. Something like that, Brian murmured. You should go, Amelia said. Your world and mine, they don't mix. Today proved that. You're right, Brian agreed. But he didn't move. But Amelia, if you ever need anything at all, you call me. Promise me. I can't promise that, Amelia said. Because calling you means inviting your world into mine. And I've worked too hard for too long to have it destroyed by violence. I don't understand. The words hurt more than Brian expected. He nodded slowly. I understand. Take care of yourself, Amelia Sullivan. You too, Brian Castellano. As Brian left, Amelia felt something in her chest tighten. She'd done the right thing, the safe thing, the smart thing. So, why did it feel so wrong? Share this video if you believe in unlikely connections. The final twist is coming. 2 weeks later, Amelia's world fell apart. She'd been on her way home from a late cleaning job when it happened. 3 men grabbed her right outside her house, forcing her into a van before she could even scream. She woke up in a warehouse tied to a chair, her head pounding. Finally awake, a voice said. A man stepped into the light, middle-aged, expensive suit, cold eyes. Mrs. Sullivan, or should I say Brian Castellano's newest pet project. I don't know what you're talking about, Amelia said, her voice shaking. Don't play stupid, the man snapped. We know Castellano has taken an interest in you. You've been seen with him twice. That makes you valuable.
I'm nobody, Amelia protested.
I'm just a housekeeper. Your leverage, the man interrupted. And Castellano is going to pay dearly to get you back or watch you die. Either way, he'll learn that crossing Victor Gordano has consequences. Amelia's blood ran cold. She'd been right to distance herself from Brian. She'd known his world was dangerous, but she'd never imagined it would reach out and grab her anyway. For hours she sat in that chair, terrified and cold. Her captors made videos, threatening videos meant for Brian. They hit her, not enough to seriously injure, but enough to make the point. Amelia had faced hardship before, but never terror like this. She thought about her late husband, about the life they'd built together, about the house she'd fought so hard to keep, about the simple, honest existence she'd maintained for 72 years. And she thought about Brian, the dangerous, complicated man who'd shown her respect when no one else would. Then she heard it, gunfire, shouting. The warehouse exploded into chaos. The door burst open, and Brian stormed in like an avenging angel. His face was a mask of fury unlike anything Amelia had ever seen. Behind him, his men moved with lethal efficiency, subduing Jacob's guards. "Get away from her." Brian's voice was a roar that made even the hardened criminals flinch. What happened next was too fast for Amelia to fully process. Brian moved through Giordano's men like a force of nature. There was violence, controlled, purposeful violence that spoke of years of training and absolute ruthlessness. And then he was there cutting Amelia's bonds, lifting her carefully into his arms. "I've got you," he murmured. "You're safe now. I've got you." Amelia couldn't speak. She just buried her face against his chest and let the tears come. Later, in the back of the SUV, wrapped in Brian's jacket, Amelia finally found her voice. "How did you find me?" "I've had people watching your house since the party," Brian admitted. "I knew Jordana would try something. I just didn't know when." His jaw clenched. "I should have protected you better." "This isn't your fault," Amelia said. "Yes, it is." Brian counted. "I put you at risk the moment I involved myself in your life. I should have stayed away." "But you didn't," Amelia observed. "No," Brian agreed softly. "I didn't." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Amelia asked, "What happens now to those men to Giordano?" "You don't want to know," Brian said. "You're right," Amelia acknowledged. "I don't." She looked at him. "Brian, I can't keep living in fear because someone might use me to hurt you." "I know," Brian said. "That's why I'm giving you a choice." "What kind of choice?" Brian turned to face her fully. "I can set you up somewhere safe. New identity, new city, enough money that you'll never have to work again. You'll be completely disconnected from me, from my world. You'll be safe." "And the other option?" Amelia asked, though she already knew. "You stay," Brian said simply. "Under my protection in my world. It means bodyguards, armored cars, living in one of my secure properties. It means accepting that danger will always be near, but so will I." Amelia was quiet for a long moment. It was an impossible choice. Safety and anonymity or danger and what? A strange friendship with a mob boss. The attention of a man who lived in darkness, but looked at her like she was light. "I won't run," Amelia finally said. "I've lived in Chicago for 40 years. I've buried a husband here. I have friends, a community, a life. I won't let fear take that from me." "Amelia," but she continued firmly, "I also won't lie to myself about what you are, or what your life means. If I stay, if I accept your protection, I need to know the truth. All of it. No more polite fictions about import, export." Brian studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "All right, the truth. I control most of the organized crime operations in the Midwest. Drugs, gambling, construction rackets, political corruption. If there's money in it and it's illegal, I have a hand in it. I've killed people, ordered executions, made decisions that would put me in prison for life if anyone could prove them." He paused, watching her face for judgment. "I'm not a good man, Amelia. I try to have honor, to protect those who can't protect themselves, to follow certain codes, but I'm still a criminal, a very dangerous one. Are you trying to scare me away?" Amelia asked. "Yes," Brian admitted. "Because you deserve better than this. Better than me." Amelia reached out and took his hand, surprising them both. "Maybe I do," she agreed. "But sometimes we don't get what we deserve. We get what we choose." And I'm choosing to believe that a man who stood up for an old woman in a bank, who respects the dignity of hard work, who is terrified I'd be hurt. That man has something worth believing in. Brian's voice was rough. You're making a mistake. Maybe, Amelia said, but it's my mistake to make. And Brian, I've spent 72 years playing it safe. Maybe it's time I did something reckless. For the first time since Amelia had met him, Brian Castellano smiled, truly smiled with warmth and something that might have been hope. Then I promise you this, he said. No one will ever disrespect you again. No one will ever make you feel small or worthless. And no one will ever lay a hand on you while I'm alive. That's a dangerous promise, Amelia observed. I'm a dangerous man, Brian replied. But for you, sell me whatever you need me to be. As the SUV pulled up to one of Brian's secure properties, a beautiful brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, Amelia looked at the man beside her. He was wrong about one thing. He was a good man trapped in a bad life. And maybe, just maybe, she could remind him of that. Brian, she said as they climbed out of the car. Yes, thank you for respecting me enough to tell me the truth. Brian helped her up the steps, his hand gentle on her elbow. Thank you for trusting me despite knowing it. Inside, the brownstone was warm and furnished with quiet elegance. Brian showed Amelia to a bedroom that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Rest, he said. Tomorrow we'll figure out everything else. Security details, routines, whatever makes you comfortable. This is your home now for as long as you want it. Brian, Amelia called as he turned to leave. Yes, your grandmother would be proud of you. Not for what you do, maybe, but for who you are underneath it all. Brian stood still for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. That's the kindest thing anyone said to me in years. After he left, Amelia sat on the edge of the elegant bed, her mind spinning. She'd just agreed to accept protection from a mob boss to live in his world, to put her trust in a man who just admitted to crimes that would shock most people. But she'd also seen his fury when he'd found her captured, his gentleness as he'd cut her free, his respect when he told her the truth instead of lies. Maybe she was a foolish old woman. Maybe this would all end badly. But for the first time in 7 years since her husband's death, Amelia Sullivan felt truly seen, truly valued, truly protected, and that was worth the risk. Final video in this series coming next. Don't miss the emotional conclusion. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Brian's office, a penthouse suite overlooking Lake Michigan. Amelia sat in one of the leather chairs working on her laptop. Yes, a laptop. At 73, she decided it was time to learn new skills. Brian had hired a patient tutor, and Amelia had discovered she rather enjoyed technology. She was currently taking online courses in business management, of all things. You know, Brian said from behind his desk, when I offered you this position as my community liaison, I thought you'd reject it. Amelia looked up with a smile. Why would I reject the opportunity to make sure your legitimate businesses actually helped the communities they're in? In the months since that terrifying night in the warehouse, Amelia's life had transformed in ways she never imagined. She lived in the brownstone, protected but free. She'd stopped cleaning houses, not because Brian forbade it, but because he'd offered her something better, a position that actually used her intelligence and her deep understanding of what working-class communities needed. She now oversaw Brian's charitable foundations, his community investments, his efforts to, in her words, do something decent with all that money. It wasn't redemption exactly. Brian was still who he was, did what he did. But Amelia had become his conscience, his connection to the people he'd once been, the values his grandmother had taught him. The community center in Englewood is almost finished, Amelia reported. Job training, childcare, health services, all in one place, just like we discussed. Just like you demanded, Brian corrected with amusement. Details, Amelia said. There was a knock at the door. Marco entered, followed by a young woman, a new employee in one of Brian's restaurants. Boss, Marco said, we have a situation. Megan here says, my manager is stealing from the register. The young woman. Megan interrupted nervously. And he says if I report it, I'll be fired. He says he has connections that no one will believe me over him. Brian's expression hardened. Amelia stood up, walking over to the frightened woman. "Come sit down, honey," Amelia said gently, guiding her to a chair. "Tell us everything, and don't worry. You did exactly the right thing by coming here." As Megan explained the situation, Amelia watched Brian's face. She saw the fury there, not at the theft itself, but at the abuse of power, at someone making a young worker feel helpless and alone. When Megan finished, Brian leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. That manager will be fired today. The stolen money will be returned, and you will receive a promotion to assistant manager with a raise."
He paused.
"And, Megan, if anyone in any of my businesses ever makes you feel threatened or powerless again, you come directly to me. Understood?" Megan nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you. I didn't know if you'd believe me." "I believe in protecting people who work hard and do the right thing," Brian said firmly. "Always." After Megan left, Amelia returned to her chair. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said softly. "You keep saying that," Brian observed. "Because it's true." They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Brian spoke. "Amelia, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you regret it? Accepting my protection? Living in this world?" Amelia considered the question carefully. Her life was different now, more complicated, sometimes dangerous, always unconventional. She lived under the protection of a crime boss. She worked for organizations funded by illegal enterprises. She'd seen things, learned things that would have horrified her old self. But she'd also helped open 3 community centers, established scholarship programs, created job training initiatives, made sure that the money flowing through Brian's empire at least did some good in the world. And she'd found something unexpected, a friend, a connection, someone who valued her mind, her experience, her moral compass. "No," Amelia finally said. "I don't regret it." "Do you regret helping me that day in the bank?" Brian looked at her and his expression was soft. "That was the best decision I've made in years. Even though I make you donate thousands to charity every month," Amelia teased. "Even though," Brian confirmed, "you make me better, Amelia. You remind me that power should be used to protect, not just to control." "Well, someone has to keep you honest," Amelia said. "As honest as a mob boss can be," Brian amended. "It's a work in progress," Amelia agreed with a smile. That evening, as Amelia was preparing to leave the office, Brian walked her to the elevator. It was a routine they'd established. He never let her leave alone. "Dinner tomorrow?" Brian asked. "There's a new Italian place I'm considering investing in. I want your opinion." "My opinion on the food or the investment?" Amelia asked. "Both," Brian said. "Your palate is better than most food critics, and your business sense is sharper than my accountant's." "Flattery will get you everywhere," Amelia said, then added more seriously. "Brian, thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me," Amelia said simply. "Not just an old woman, not just a victim, not just a project, for seeing me." Brian's voice was gentle. "How could I not? You're one of the most remarkable people I've ever met." As the elevator doors closed, Amelia reflected on the strange path her life had taken. She'd started that morning 6 months ago, just wanting to deposit her property tax money. She'd ended up changing the life of one of Chicago's most powerful and dangerous men, and he'd changed hers right back. The next morning, Amelia's phone rang early. It was Brian. "Turn on the news," he said without preamble. Channel 7. Amelia fumbled for her remote. The news showed Connor Mitchell, the bank teller who'd humiliated her, being led away in handcuffs. Arrested on charges of embezzlement and fraud. The reporter was saying Mitchell allegedly targeted elderly customers, intimidating them into withdrawing large cash sums, which he would then steal and replace with false documentation. Amelia's hand went to her mouth. "Brian, did you?" "I had nothing to do with his arrest," Brian said, and she could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "The FBI had been investigating him for months. I just made sure they knew to look more carefully at his interactions with elderly clients." "You can do that. Just call the FBI." "I told you, Amelia, I have connections everywhere, and I use them to protect people who can't protect themselves." After they hung up, Amelia sat in her comfortable brownstone living room thinking about justice, about power, about the strange turns life could take. She was 73 years old. She lived under the protection of a mob boss. She worked to redirect illegal money toward legal good. She'd found purpose, friendship, and respect in the most unlikely place. Her life made no sense by conventional standards. But for the first time in 7 years since her husband's death, Amelia Sullivan was truly happy. And that she decided was all that mattered. The end. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video as your support is important for me to continue creating content.